Cool. Yeah, let's let it rip. Jim Ward, hey, good to see you, man. How's morale down in are you in El Paso, Texas?
Yeah, I'm in El Paso.
Okay, nice, man. What was it? I've never actually met anyone from El Paso, Texas. What was it like growing up in El Paso, right on the border?
I always refer to it as like brackish water. It's kind of like the first world and a third world all mixed together, and culture's sort of a port city. It's a dry port, but it's still a port city. Um, so I think there's a lot of interesting characters for sure in this place.
Like a lot of like drifterism, weirdoism, nomadic people kind of moving back and forth.
Yeah, I kind of always refer to people that kind of settle here are sort of a different breed. It's kind of still a little bit of a frontier, I think, in some ways. We're very geographically far from most places. And our sister city, Juarez, is the same. It's kind of pretty secluded on the Mexican side. And then on this side, it's pretty secluded as far as how far we are from other cities. So you kind of have to be a little bit tougher, I think, to live here.
And how did you find yourself there? Like, did your folks move there? Have they just been based there for a long time?
So I'm fourth or fifth generation, depending on who you ask. But my family's been here. At least one strain of my family's been here for a very long time.
Cool.
They came on the railroads.
Do you know from where?
Kind of. I think my great grandfather may have come from Illinois.
Okay, cool.
But he was an engineer that built train bridges.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, man. All the ancestry stuff is really fascinating. I just started getting into it in like ancestry.com, and I traced all these people back I never even knew existed. Like I called my great uncle Dick Preston, who I didn't even know was a person until like 2 months ago, and I talked to him for like an hour, and he told me all this crazy shit about family relatives like fighting in the Revolutionary War. A couple of them winding up at like war camps. One crazy like great aunt chopped up her husband with an axe. Like some pretty
that stuff's wild.
Wild intel.
We have some family history that's been sort of passed down, but I did the ancestry thing for a second. I didn't get really far because I was sort of more interested in my wife's family because she doesn't know very much about it. So the little time I had to put into it, I kind of put into that and sort of ran into dead ends pretty quickly with her stuff. But it's really interesting for sure.
Yeah, it's cool. And it's like the more you find out, the more addicting you get to it. And like, but at a certain point, you're like, do I really want to know? Like, how much more do I want to know? Like, what kind of weird psychos lie down the family line,
Yeah, that makes sense.
How did you discover like punk rock music in El Paso? Like, what was the catalyst? What records did you find? How'd you get your mitts on it?
So for a couple of years when I was a kid, we lived in Albuquerque, which is about 250 miles north of El Paso.
Okay. Sure.
And that's where I got into skateboarding. I was like 11, started skateboarding, and somebody gave me Subhumans from the Cradle to the Grave LP. And that was kind of my intro to punk rock. And I mean, I liked music before, but sort of weird stuff for a kid. I was really into Benny Goodman and big band. I like Harry Connick Jr. and stuff like that. And once I discovered that and sort of skateboarding at the same time, then it kind of became a thing. And then we moved back here when I was 12. And I started playing bass in punk bands and listening to the Pixies and Dead Kennedys and Minor Threat and sort of all that stuff. And just my best buddy who lived here also was into the same stuff. And I guess that summer, my sister came back from band camp with Jawbox Gripe and Jawbreaker Unfun on cassette. And that was kind of that's always what I attribute to being like the eureka moment for me. That was kind of where I found my brand of punk rock, melodic and thoughtful, kind of not as angry. I was not an angry punk rock kid.
So were you pretty shy as far as like singing? Because did you not start singing till later? You said you're kind of a bass player to start, hey?
I played bass from 12 to like 16, just like in little punk bands with my best friend. Nothing really big. And then I met this guy at Sound Warehouse, which is like a record video place that was around back in the day.
Yep.
And he wanted to, he was in a band and they were looking for a singer guitar player. And I just sort of fibbed and said that I was both a singer and a guitar player. And because I just wanted to be in a real band. And so I went to practice and I borrowed my cousin's Les Paul and his amp. And so I looked legit, right? And I went and I just basically played fifths. So I was like writing songs like I would on bass, but I was just adding a fifth. So it was kind of a chord, you know, and just making up words on the spot. And I found out really quickly that I was pretty good at that, like just inventing things quickly. And I guess I got whatever you call it. I got the gig. So 16 and 17, I fronted a band here in El Paso called Self. And I graduated when I was 17 and the bass player was 5 years older than me probably. And he didn't want to tour because he already had an apartment and a girlfriend and was going to college, you know. And all I wanted to do was tour. So I called Cedric up and he had just come home from tour with his bands and that summer, and we started at the drive-in. So I was 17. And I definitely wanted to not be the singer in that band. Like I loved being a sideman.
It is like way more fun. Like this, the front man, the singer gets more glory, but it's so much more pressure. It's more work. There's more people leaning on you. So yeah, I definitely feel where like being not in the middle of the stage is like, it's kind of a huge bonus. So you can just really enjoy yourself more and not worry about blowing out your voice, the whole thing. So what about when you say like starting, what was like the first time where you like got into a room and you're like, holy shit, like people actually like us. How do we go on tour? What do you do? How do you start?
So I lived about 2 blocks away from one of the venues that touring bands were coming through, and it was just called the Mesa Inn. It was like a ballroom and like a bar and a hotel that they had shows in. And I would walk down to the shows from my parents' house, and I was only allowed to stay out till like whatever 9:30 or something. So I would only see local bands. So I would go for sound check. I would like sneak my way in and I would like go watch band sound check. And then I would just ask them like 1,000 questions. How do you get a van? How do you get shows? How do you meet people in other cities? Like, how do you keep your guitar in tune? Like, how do you blah, blah, blah. And I was I think probably a pretty annoying kid, but I just had endless curiosity. So at the same time, reading Jack Kerouac and listening to punk rock was sort of this combination that made me want to not go to college and just want to tour and just want to have adventures and see the world. And to me, it was so romantic, like just this idea of getting in the van, as Rollins would say, and just going and experiencing things that you wouldn't otherwise. And I had no desire to be here anymore. And it took actually years and years before I appreciated this town for what it is, because I just wanted to leave and have these experiences. So we did my first out of town show was the fall of 1994. I had just turned 18 and we played 4 Texas shows. Texas is a big state. So it was like 2,000 miles or something that we drove to play 4 shows. And then we got home from that and we signed like a US tour kind of, that sort of made it up the West Coast and across to Chicago and then down to Mississippi and then back through Texas to El Paso. And that was like 42 days.
Holy crap.
And
you booked that?
We booked it with Book Your Own Fucking Life. You know?
Wow, I remember that name.
Yeah. And it was hard, and we all, you know, our parents would send us $20 at a time so we could get burritos and eat at Taco Bell and play to nobody in a lot of cities. But when I got home, I was 100% hooked. Like, yeah, that was like a life-changing experience. And to be 18 and all the stuff that you thought it was going to be, all the adventure and all the craziness, all of that stuff was true. Like I didn't go, and I think if I had gone on that tour and it was the way tour is now, which is like just 8 hours of boringness, and you know, there's very little adventure at this point. But when you're 18 and you're in a band that no one's heard of, and you're just like sleeping on park benches and eating at People's Park in San Francisco for free because you don't have any money, and staying in squats and just staying at like punk houses and all the chaos and craziness that exists. That's the dream. I think that's like and to be young and be able to endure it is amazing.
What was the worst sleeping conditions on that run, on that tour?
I mean, a lot of days you know, just 5 dudes sleeping in the van is what it was. And if the van was hot, you would sleep outside. So just stop at a rest stop. And, you know, I've loads of memories of waking up on concrete park benches or rest stop benches. You know, like everybody sleeps at disgusting houses. Like when you stay at punk houses, there's a lot of grossness that happens. But
do these people wash their floors in soda? That's what I remember thinking a lot.
Like, oh yeah, for sure. Like your feet stick when you get in, and you know, just so many weird stories. Like you would stay at somebody's house, and they'd be like, "You can totally stay here, but you can't use the bathroom." I'd be like, "Okay, like I guess we have a safe place to stay inside," but yeah, just like weird things like that. Don't do this or don't do that, which is all fine. I mean, at the end of the day, you're getting somewhere to stay for free, and that was important.
Yeah, I
couldn't even tell you how many tours I did before I ever stayed in a hotel room.
Right. Yeah.
Like, that was just unheard of.
It is funny with punk houses or like, I don't know, complete rat's nests. Like, you know, you got to love the people for putting you up. It's like really sweet of them. But I'm always like blown away at how oblivious they are to like their own filth. You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, just make yourself at home. Help yourself to the bong. Help yourself to the couch. And you look at the couch and it's just like, there's like Bud Light bottles poking out of the crevasses and like, you know, goblin jizz. And it's there's like foam coming out of the cushions, and they're like, oh yeah, it's just enjoy, brother. But it is it's hilarious to think back on some of this stuff and just be unfazed by it. Like I remember like going into some unfinished basement in Pittsburgh and just like piling cardboard boxes on the concrete floor, and that was it, you know. And that's how it goes. You hear
I've definitely used merch as blankets and cardboard boxes as beds, and like you know, sometimes you walk in and you're just like, nope, and you just go back to the van.
That's what you call a drive-by, Jim Ward.
Yeah. There would always be like one guy that would stay though, like, nah, I'm so beat, I'll do it. I'll sleep in there on the floor. I don't care.
There's like some sort of what do you think about this? There's like some sort of like masochism with touring and musicians and songwriters. It's like, what is it about that bands get addicted to, or they get there's like this romanticism about it, you know. It's like I think
there's just a higher purpose. That's the thing.
Yeah,
and the purpose is to share your music, and that is so important that everything else is livable. Everything else is okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you just have this like blind ambition toward it for so long, and thank God you do, because you know, if you could zoom out and see the big picture of the road that lies ahead of you and how brutal it's going to be and how hard it's going to be, you might not do it. So yeah, I think there's just something about like, I mean, putting your head down and just fucking going. And I think you know, it's like you mentioned Henry Rollins, kind of like the Henry Rollins philosophy. You just keep going, don't be soft, don't look up too many times, and persevere. And you know, you got to be sane with it. You got to live within the realms of reality as to the point of like, is this working? Is this not working? Do we adjust? Do we make, do we change our strategy or our trajectory? But at the same time, it's just like, there's a reason everybody's not in a touring band, because it's brutal. And if it was easy, everybody would be in 4 touring bands, you know. Because
I think also something that benefited me, at least me, is that I never had an end goal. So I wasn't trying to get anywhere. So there's no disappointment, you know. Like if I go on tour now and there's 250 people instead of 2,500 people, it doesn't bother me. Like, that's not my goal. Has always been to just have the adventure and to make the music. So any sort of like financial or fame or success has never been, I'm not aiming for anything, right? So I don't have to work. I'm not disappointed by anything.
That's a really great way to think about things. Yeah, I relate to that quite a lot. People, you know, they'll ask you like, oh, what are your goals with music? And it's like, just to keep doing it, you know, there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You just, it's like exercising, you know. It's like you need to work out, or your body atrophies, it gets weak. It's like, I think if you have that creative itch, it's like you have to create, you have to make stuff, you have to write, or your brain atrophies and you no longer feel good. So Yeah, I love that. I love your take on that. Tell me, what was the worst show of that tour? First tour?
El Paso, actually.
Hometown Glory.
Nobody came, not one person.
Wow.
Yeah, we actually like loaded in, waited around for a while, and then just loaded out and left and drove to Phoenix.
Well,
I mean,
good.
there was plenty of shows with like 5 people or 2 people, but the hometown was the only show with no people, which is amazing if you think about it. Like, not even our friends came.
Why
But
didn't
I
your
think
parents
now
come?
people make this huge deal about like, we're going on tour, you got to come, and like, you know, the like the fundraiser show or whatever, and that's just not the way it was in 1995. Like, you didn't have fundraiser shows. If no one came, you just drove to the next city. That's what
I
it
love how
was.
you didn't play the show. Like some bands will just like take it in the ass and just play the show to 0 people or the sound guy.
We would anywhere else, and we
Yeah.
have. I mean,
Yeah.
we've played to nobody.
Sure.
That band, it's one of those things, like people talk about shows they were at early on in our band, that there's no way they were at. There's just no way, because there was nobody there. Those are the ones that always crack me up, like, oh, I remember that. Like, no, you don't. There's no way. There's like 1,000 people remember going to a show with 5 people at it. No, you weren't there.
Yeah, nice.
For sure.
Yeah, well, it's what was the point where you were like, okay, this is getting somewhere. We're no longer just playing the toilet bowl circuit. Like maybe music industry people are starting to take notice. There's more people coming. What was that kind of moment or section of time where you're like, okay, here we go?
So I think there was, I left the band in 1996 for about, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. And they did a tour without me. It was like 100 days. And we had put out a record on Flipside. So, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, like with that band, without the drive, and it always incrementally got bigger. Like when we would go back to a city, if we played to one person, there'd be 10 people there, because the sound guy would be like, holy shit, you got to see these guys. There was no one there and they lost their minds. Right. So it always got incrementally better. The next time we went to New York, there was 100 people. There was a moment for sure. Well, you know, like when we put out a record on Flipside, and then we were looking for a label, and the very last label, everybody passed on us. Every single label that you could name from the 1997 roster of indie rock labels passed on us, except Fearless was the last one that said we could put out a record, and we put out In Casino Out, and that felt like the shift, because there was a label that people knew. So people were we were bridging the gap between just luckily playing to 10 people and then building on that to now having a label telling people to listen to this. And then the record was, I think, good enough that people were intrigued to come and see us. And then that would sort of seal the deal, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
then
totally.
We put out Via with sort of the leftover songs from In Casino Out, and then we recorded 3 new songs here at Sonic Ranch. And at that point, it started getting to like, back then, if you sold 10,000 records on an indie, you started getting majors sniffing around. That was like the test, right? If you could sell 10,000 units, then they'll start sniffing around. And that's when it got crazy, for sure.
And
it was like 1998.
Yeah. That was, yeah. What did the peak look like? Are you like going and playing theaters and people are moshing, and are the mosh pits getting a little out of control? What does it look like?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it was. And we did, when Relationship came out, there was like a ton of hype, and we were on tour we toured a lot with the Murder City Devils. So we were with them on the US tour. So the record is sort of just came out. We did a US tour that was already booked. Every single show sold out. There was the energy and the craziness, and started playing like TV shows, like late night shows, and going to festivals where all the bands are standing around watching you because they've heard but they haven't seen. And then we went to Europe, and same thing. We had a punk rock booking agent, and we should have been more gracious in what we were doing. I think we tried to play both sides of the fence a little bit. We wanted to stay punk rock, but we wanted we were happy to be on the cover of magazines, and we were happy that we were in Virgin Special Projects, which is like only 5 bands in the world are in this division of Virgin, where they put tons of energy into you because they think it's going to be stardom, right? But I think we just we didn't commit to one or the other, really. We just tried to ride it out, and what happened is we just exploded, or imploded, actually, and we didn't even finish the European tour. So yeah, there was people. We were from the school of please don't kill each other in the crowd.
Yeah.
And it's hard to control at that point. You go from playing to a couple of hundred people to 1,000 plus, and it's just all of a sudden we're walking off stage because we can't control it.
Wow.
And it was a lot. And the other thing is you're 23 or 24 years old, and nobody around you is telling you how to cope with this stuff. And it's insane to be that young and to try and figure out how to navigate these things as 5 young men with everything in the world being thrown at you, it feels like. And the thing that has always been the escape for you is now all of a sudden the catalyst of trouble. And it just gets really, it'll do your head in pretty quick.
So yeah, what did that look like? What was your mental health like at that time?
Awful. I was just, I mean, I think it took years and years to understand what I was going through, but I didn't understand what depression was, or anxiety, or any of that stuff. And I think I had not really discovered self-medicating at that point. Like, there were a few drunken nights, but it wasn't like that was what was getting me through. That would come much later. But in those days, I think we tried so hard to hold on to each other, and I think we just couldn't, which is like the nicest way I can say about it.
Yeah. Was there anyone in the band that felt like more stable, who was kind of the band leader, who could kind of like steer some direction?
There was nothing to hold on to, for sure. It was just split in like a lot of different divisions as to what. I think some people were really excited that we had gotten to that point. Some people, that was their dream. I think some people saw opportunity to take it on their own. I was just miserable, and I'm sure I was really unfun to be around, and I don't ever blame anybody for not wanting to be around. Like, it was just a hard time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you talk about like not knowing what depression or anxiety is at that point in time. I just relate to that so much, of like going through my whole 20s having no idea like why do I feel like shit constantly? Like, technically on paper everything's all right.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I can't stop my brain from slowing down. I have no coping skills. I don't even know what to address here. And it can take a long ass time to figure that stuff out. And that was a different era. Now it's like this like mental health positivity era, which, it's a massive net gain. Sometimes it can be pretty cringy online, but it's amazing that there are these tools in place for people to figure this shit out, especially younger people, which is something I never knew about or didn't have. And being a musician, and I mean, having no real success at that age, but still just wobbly as I could be. But so what happened after? Were you obviously things were without the drive-in? It was time to kind of part ways. Did you take a break from music? Did you feel amped up and excited for a fresh start?
I immediately went to, we broke up, or we stopped the tour in February, at the end of February, and I got married in March. And so Christina and I got married, and then I immediately went to Austin and started playing with the guys from a band called Rhythm of Black Lines, and started writing songs. And then I sort of got pulled back to El Paso with the 2 members of the band that became Sparta, and just sort of asked if I would come back and do this band and be the singer. And I did, because that's my personality, is if you ask me, if you need me, then I'll do it,
Nice. Yeah.
And that's the way it went. And then just dove head on into writing that record and putting out what would become Wiretap Scars, and started the whole process over again. So it's like pretty much never stopped at all.
Nice. Yeah, I remember being in middle school and just back in when Best Buy was like the CD haven. You remember those days?
Yeah.
And
sure.
I saw your record on the shelf. I had no idea what it was, but I bought it just because the art looked cool. And then that drum beat in the first track of the record, "Cut Your Ribbon," is like one of the most iconic drum beats like in rock music. It's in my head like constantly, and this is from 7th grade to now, whatever, 24 years later or whatever. So I tap it on my steering wheel all the time. It's
that's good to hear.
Yeah. How did that beat come about? Was it just goofing around?
We wrote that record in like a couple of weeks, really. I mean, the skeleton of it for sure. So I think it's just we had riffs, and we just all sat in a house and worked like 10 hours a day to make a record as fast as possible.
Cool. And when did you start to notice your kind of like mental health improve, and you're kind of getting a grasp and kind of evolving kind of emotionally? When did that happen?
In my 40s, probably. So it's been like a conscious effort the last like 5 years to be better for the people around me. And it's hard. It's super hard because it's a weird life, first off. It's really lonely. More so, I mean, people always talk about it, but there's a point you get to in this career where it is brutally lonely. And if you're a social person and you do this, it's pretty tricky on your brain because you end up being around people you shouldn't be around, or you're easy to be taken advantage of. And I try to always be there for younger bands, even if they're a few years younger than me, just because of the road I've been through. When you can offer them a shoulder or an ear and not want anything from them. I think the hardest part of this industry is that a lot of the people that you lean on or want naturally to go to for help are also benefiting from your career. And it's hard for them, I think, to separate that sometimes. Like, what may be best for me is not what's best for the band or the record label.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple of like real dark points in life where it just gets really hard to know where to turn to. And this is before, early on, there's nobody talks about mental health. Nobody talks about like, like people are always shocked when a rock star kills themselves, and I'm not ever shocked by that.
Yeah.
Not once. So I think it's just hard for you to find those safe places to talk to people and get good advice.
Well, actually, that was my next question. You talked about like this, it gets to a point in a music career where, it's always lonely, but it gets exponentially lonely, and it can get quite bad. Do you have any advice for dealing with that? I mean, I just turned 36. And I'm starting to feel that pressure a bit more, kind of, the natural like societal pressure of settling down, the classic kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But all my friends, not all, but most of my friends have kind of stepped aside from music or arts on like a really gung-ho serious basis at this point, and it does feel really strange and kind of isolating, like the world has turned and left me here kind of situation.
I think, again, like if you don't have these sort of preconceived notions as where you're supposed to go or what you're supposed to do, then that takes one level of stress off. Like, should I be financially more successful than I am? Because if you look at my career, like probably, but it doesn't bother me because I don't do things based on income or money, is that a bad thing? Probably for my family, but it's not a good thing for my mental health to do that. Right. The other thing is, learning that it's okay to say no is probably like the biggest thing I talk to younger bands about. It's like, people are going to tell you that if you don't play this radio festival, then they're not going to add your track, and then your career's over, and then everybody's going to lose, and you're going to be a failure. And it's really easy for your mind to go down that path, right? But the thing is, it's not true. And that's the part that nobody tells you, is that if you play the radio show, nothing is guaranteed. Nothing at all. I mean, maybe it's guaranteed. Maybe they say we won't play your track, but fuck them. Like, if that's what your life is based on, some stupid radio station in some stupid city playing your fucking song twice, like that's not worth beating yourself up or missing family engagements or ruining your life or having a band fight. Like, none of it's worth it.
Yeah.
But there's going to be people in your career that are going to push incessantly for you to do fucking everything, because to them it's throwing darts, right? But the darts are your life, and that's bullshit to put that on you. But
you only get so many darts.
Yeah, and then you run out. And it's not even like, you look at guys that have sold millions of records and play arenas and still find nowhere to turn and end up taking their life. Like, you got to just say no and find a happier place. But it's okay to say no. That's the thing. It's like, it's okay to say no to stuff. It's okay to not do things.
Yeah. I think too, when you're in that imprinting phase of a band, that early scrappy phase, when there aren't very many opportunities, you say yes to everything, and then bam, that's kind of imprinted on you. That's just kind of how you're built. So when the opportunities start coming, when things start happening for you, you're just like naturally saying yes to everything because it looks cool on paper, and then you look at the calendar and you're like, fuck. And
I think and that's okay too. I'm not saying don't say yes to everything at some point and understand where your boundaries are, but once you find your boundaries, that's the part. I mean, there was a long time we said yes to everything, and it was fantastic. Like, it was all these great experiences and playing with these crazy bands that I would never have imagined us playing with, and playing these crazy countries, and all of that stuff is because we said yes. But the point where you're like really miserable, it's okay to say no. Like, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to stop. Like, yes, your record may stop selling X amount of units a week, even though I don't think anyone sells records anymore, but there's nothing wrong with it, because what happens is you end up, we're living testimony. Like, you end up putting yourself in a position where you really never exist legitimately again,
and you talk about playing some really far away countries, strange places. What comes to mind?
I mean, going to Japan for the first time is just insane. You don't even know, like, my brain couldn't comprehend what was happening. It's like being on the moon. And this is 20 years ago. Nobody is speaking English. There's no iPhones. There's no, you're ordering off menus by pointing at pictures.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You're handing people money and they take out what you're supposed to pay because you just don't have any conception of what money is there. You know what I mean? It's amazing.
It's like you're living in like Super Mario Brothers for real.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
We were there like 3 or 4 years ago. Literally, you can pay money and they give you a go-kart with like a bunch of other people. They dress you up as like a Super Mario character and you drive around Tokyo in a go-kart dressed as a Super Mario Kart character. So
this is the greatest place in the world. I mean, I couldn't live there, but it's the greatest place to visit in the world.
Yeah. I almost bought I got really obsessed with those Japanese taxis. Toyota Crowns, they're called, when I was over there. It's just like a beautiful car. And
with the little doily headrest.
Yeah. And the rear view mirrors kind of flare out. They're like on the hood, and it's just a gorgeous car. And I was trying to buy one for a while. I was looking at all these import sites, and there was a while where you could buy them in the States, because when they were done using them in Japan, they got imported here, but the driver's side wheel was on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
So, and then I think at this point, and you could buy them for cheap because of that, but I think at this point it's now like illegal to have a steering wheel on that other side of the road in the States.
That's dumb.
I missed my window, dude. It could have been great. I could have had an amazing clown car. Anywhere else besides Japan that tripped you out?
I mean, I love Australia very much. Just sort of the farthest places, like the Nordic countries that are just so perfectly pristine and beautiful, and it's unreal. I mean, it's kind of anything that's the polar opposite of my hometown seems bizarre to me, like big trees and snow and lakes on top of mountains. And sometimes you get to play these festivals that are in these like really idyllic, gorgeous places, and it's just like I try to always take a few minutes to walk around and look and just sort of remember. And I mean, there's been many sleepless nights where I've just stood in the middle of roadways so that I could see all the way down one road and turn around and see all the way down one road, and then just enjoy the landscape and the buildings and everything that's just a little bit different. I love that stuff. I love I love going places and like the vents for the air conditioners are different because they just developed differently in different parts of the world, or door handles or hinges, or, you know, like all those little things that you go to the hardware store to buy something here, and then you're in Europe or like somewhere in Nordic Europe, and all of a sudden all these hinges are so much cooler and well built and amazing, and you're like, how did this develop? I
Oh
think those are
yeah.
sort of the things that blow my mind still
Yeah,
to this
yeah.
day about doing this job.
I relate to that, man. Like that the hand painted signage that's like residual from, you know, the 40s or the 50s. You can still
Yeah.
see it like a ghost sign on a brick building in Oslo, and it's like it's snowing and you can see the neon signs on the main drag with the mountain in the background. It's those are moments where you just really try your best to be present because they're kind of like
And they're just for you. Like,
yeah.
no matter what, you can never explain that to anybody uh appropriately. That they're just for you, and those are kind of like my favorite things.
Yeah, it's profound to have those. Does that happen to you where you're like just like loving a really tiny moment and it hits you and you're just like, I am aware that this is happening to me right now. That happens to me so little, but when it does, I
Yeah,
kind of tear up and shit.
it's usually the time where I just am so grateful for this life in general, everything, all the decisions, all the things that happened, everything that got you to that one point. um I just try to appreciate where I am that day. It's not
Yeah.
easy for sure, but when it happens, it's great.
Yeah, okay. Great. Well, it doesn't sound like you're a man who walks around with a lot of regret then, hey?
It's pretty pointless.
Yeah, great. That's beautiful,
Not a
man.
lot, not a lot to, doesn't do you a lot of good.
What kind of works for you? Like what's been working for you outside of music? Like what do you really enjoy? What gets you excited about life outside of rock and roll?
I like building stuff. So my wife and I have a restaurant here. We just move locations, and she designs it and I build it. We have done some other businesses in El Paso, but the part that I really enjoy is the creating of the business, like physically making a space. I enjoy that stuff. It feels the same as making a record, only with your hands and tools and the challenge of it. I mean, it's actually the same, exactly the same as making a record. Use your hands and your brain and your creativity, and that's the part that I've enjoyed. Um, I'm on a board for the El Paso Community Foundation, which is a nonprofit that benefits the community. It's massive, over $100 million trust that does great things. So I sort of have loved that evolution in my life, where you went from punk rock shows and trying to make sure that people don't wear fur coats to now, sort of this bigger vision of charity and community resolve. That makes sense.
Yeah, man, that's a beautiful thing. And that's cool. Like I respect that so much. You got carpentry skills. That's something I envy tremendously. And
I'm not great at it, but I love doing it.
yeah, yeah. I remember just yeah, getting off kind of the hamster wheel of music sometimes and yeah, doing something. Well, you say it's kind of the same. I think of it as quite different, but I see the analogy, and I
In the end,
envy
it's
those
making
with
something.
creating. I've been trying to do the same thing with like journaling, writing, painting, stuff like that, just to kind of stay creative, but get into a new lane, to kind of kick
Yeah.
your own ass creatively and that sort of thing. So
I've been
El
doing
Paso,
these.
yeah. Go ahead.
I did these Instagram interviews during COVID, called Friday Beers, where I would just have Instagram chat with somebody, like a friend, because I missed my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up doing like 64 of those
Oh, cool.
with everybody I had like Josh Homme and Jeff Ahmed from Pearl Jam, and, a bunch of friends, and it turned into these like really intimate conversations, like one-on-one artist conversations that were super cool. So I've started filming those now, and putting them out. And really like that. I think that will be something that I keep working on, because it's like a new skill that I really enjoy being on that side of the microphone. So I like doing that as much as I like doing anything right now, sort of, and continuing to write write music and write words and stay busy.
Yeah, I get that. Isn't the whole, like, for lack of a better term, like the talk radio format? It's like such a. I'm just realizing now, like having done the podcast 2 years, what like a crazy art medium it is. Like the art of conversation.
It's
you know,
hard.
it's really hard, and you only get like a certain amount of decisions within a conversation. Like, for example, us talking here for 45 minutes. Like I only have. There's 8 forks in the road that I will come upon where I can steer this way or steer that way, and I could steer us towards something really boring, which or we could go weird and pave some new trails. So, but you're an easy fellow to talk to. You're very insightful, and I feel like I have much more information than I did 45 minutes ago. And I have one more question for you, Jim Moore. Did you ever get to tour in Mexico?
I've only gotten to play Mexico City. So I've played Mexico City a couple of times, and because of where I live, we actually vacation there quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm going there next week.
I love Mexico. I love the people and the culture, and it's very similar to what my wife is of Mexican descent, and obviously I've grown up here, and I sort of consider myself an honorary member of the community.
Beautiful.
But yeah, I love it. I love it, and I'd love to do more. It's just it's not the easiest country in the world to tour in.
Right. Yeah. Well, hey, brother, I really appreciate the time. You're a really sweet dude. I would love to see you in real life at some point. El Paso is not a place we ever really get to, but I'm fascinated by it, and I'd love to get there someday. So,
let me know if you see our name in your hometown. We'll be there.
What's your restaurant called?
It's called Eloise.
Eloise. Okay. Yes. Please come to Milwaukee, my dude. That'd be great.
Awesome.
All right, brother. Much
so much
love. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for coming on. See you, Jim.
Thank you.